All right, so we should now be live. Obviously, I'll just get this out quickly. If you can hear me, just please post something in the chat room on the side there, just so I know everything's working right. You wouldn't believe what's been going on just a few minutes ago. Anthony, my mate Anthony Crothers, who's going to be in the chat room now, thank you so much for helping me out diving on before we went live. But yeah, if anybody could just give us a shout out in the chat room to let me know that you can hear me, that would be fantastic. And then yeah, we'll do the countdown. If you're watching this and it's not James, thank you so much, mate. Deb, thanks a lot. Brandon, yeah, fantastic. Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, it's been a year since we've done these and they've actually changed the interface, and it was interesting, put it that way. It was interesting. I never knew I knew so many expletives. I think Anthony didn't either. But if you're not watching this live on the 10th of January 2020 and you've got this countdown in front of you, you don't have to sit there and watch that. So just jump forward, however long it is on your screen now, jump forward past it, and then you'll be able to see the content that we're going through tonight. But folks, I'm going to keep sort of just checking a few things before we do go live. But you should, all being well, when it gets to 30 seconds on the countdown, you should start to hear some kind of music coming through. And then, yeah, then we'll kick off and fingers crossed everything goes well. But it's amazing how different this is, having not done it for over a year. But I'll dive out and I shall see you when we get nearer to the 30-second counter. All right, so we're getting near to the 30 seconds, so hopefully you should start to hear some music coming in. That will get louder as we get nearer to the 00 mark. Then there'll be a little bit of a logo-y graphic come up, and then we should be live. So don't sit too close to your screens, because the first thing you're going to see is me. I don't want to scare you. All right, so here we are. Hopefully you can see me, hopefully you can hear me. If not, I'm talking to myself. But folks, Happy New Year. It's the first YouTube live that I've done in over a year. I was looking back in the archive there, and it was December 2018. I cannot believe it's been that long since we've done these. But I wish I hadn't left it so long, because if you'd have been in the chat room or the private video that me and Anthony were kind of doing when we were testing this out, just before, literally moments before we went live, everything is different. Everything was different. The whole setup, and there was like a 30-second plus delay. Wasn't good. But thankfully, Anthony, my mate who's in the chat room there, Anthony Crothers, you are a legend. Thanks so much for sticking with me, and just sorry for the expletives that were in the ear. But folks, yeah, I'm back. I have missed doing these. I really have missed doing these, and I want to go through just a few things, because although I've not been doing these for a year, there has been a lot going on in that past year. And if you've been following what I'm doing, you'll be knowing that I'm doing this 39-45 portraits. That's been my main focus, and certainly over the last month or two, we've been doing some recording for a new big tutorial coming out. And it's kind of like this last year doing the project and other little portraits I've been doing, that I've kind of been doing the same things when it comes to retouching. Not because I'm kind of not able to do it when I'm doing the actual photo shoot, but because out of necessity. And what I mean by that is I'm doing a lot of shoots on location where space is really limited. So there's some things you just cannot do at the time, so I've had to do them afterwards. And those are the things I want to start off with this first live stream of 2020. Can't believe I'm saying that. That I want to show you those little things. So we're going to dive over to the computer, and I'm going to show you just a few of them. They're mainly to do with backgrounds, and then there's one to do with skin. And then I want to show you just a little bit of a sample about this new tutorial that I've been recording. So let's just dive over to the computer screen. Now, hopefully you're going to be able to see my Lightroom, and you should see a gentleman by the name of Harry Billing, who I photographed only a few days ago now. That's the finished picture, and what you'll notice is when you've kind of looked through a lot of the pictures that I've done in the project, a lot of them have got this square crop. Now, the background that I'm using isn't a square crop. In fact, it doesn't really give me the ability to have that much empty space either side of the people. It's a really portable background. It's, in fact, let's just show you the actual picture out of camera. Let's just go to here. I can show you now. There is the out of camera picture. So you can see the lighting pattern and what have you. There's the after picture. There's the before picture, the out of camera shot. And you can just about see in the bottom left-hand corner there, you can see a hand coming into the picture with a reflector. That's Danny from the Veterans Charity who I was there with. He was helping me out. But this was really tight, confined space. So I want to show you how I go about fixing this to give me a square crop. And it's also making use of the new content aware fill in Photoshop, in the latest version of Photoshop, because this has just been an absolute godsend. It really has. So what I'm going to do while I'm in Lightroom, I don't do much in Lightroom, to be honest with you. I don't really sort of stick around much in there. It's mainly used for cataloguing and about 30 seconds worth of editing. I know some people do loads in Lightroom. I don't tend to do that. But let's just get the crop tool, press R as the keyboard shortcut, and I'll just crop out from the top an area that I don't want, and we'll crop out just that area in the top left hand here, because I don't want to go too tight on this. Let's just go to around about there. So you can see now we've still got plenty of background in there that I'm going to be able to use, but we need to get rid of this bit down here. And this is when I dive over to my happy place over in Photoshop. So I'm going to hold down the Command or Control key, depending on whether you're working in on an Apple computer or a Windows computer, and then press E. That'll then send this over into Photoshop. So let's just open Photoshop, and we see it coming in just there. So let's just move this camera out of the way so I can see my layers panel. So what I'm going to do here first of all then is I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to cut this little reflector out. So I'm going to go to the layers panel and unlock it. Okay, and then I'm going to get my lasso tool and just very loosely just draw out a selection around that there, like so, and then press delete. So that's now gone. So now that's gone, I'm going to use the crop tool. Again, you might have seen me doing this kind of stuff quite regularly before, but I think you're going to see something different how I'm now using this content aware. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start to give this enough space around Harry that I can then do that square crop. So I'm going to grab the left hand crop handle here, hold down the Alt or Option key, and as I click and drag outwards, it'll drag both sides out in the same kind of proportion. So we'll give it quite a bit of space just around about there. So we really are changing the composition to show that we're not limited necessarily by the size of the background we use in the shoot. So now you can see we've got all these transparent areas, and I want to kind of fill these in but make it look seamless, like it is really the background and it was that big, you know, to prove that we don't always have to be in a studio. So what I would have ordinarily done is get something like the marquee tool, and I'll go to this area on the right hand side first of all. I'll click and drag down so you can see that marching ant selection there, meaning that Photoshop is now concentrating on that particular area. But I also wanted to concentrate on the area on the right hand side. So to add to this selection, I'll hold down the shift key. That gives me a little plus icon. Hopefully you can see that on that little cursor there. And I'll click and drag out on the other side. So we include that little bit just there. Might just move that across, and I'm going to get the lasso tool just to get the rest of this transparent area here where I cut out the reflector. So lasso tool, hold down the shift key to add to the selection, and very loosely come down here now and include that. So you can see now those areas that are transparent are selected, and ordinarily what I'd do at this particular point, I would go to the edit menu and choose fill. We can use the keyboard shortcut of shift and backspace. And then from the drop down menu here, we've got content aware, which I absolutely love, and we'll click OK. Now you might hear something going on in the background now because my computer has a bit of a thromby. This is it's a quite a big file. Bottom left hand corner here tells you it's a 278 megabyte file at the moment that this is working on. So it's quite big, 16-bit image. The fans are kicking in, it's whirring away. And hopefully now it's going to fill those areas in. Let's just remove that selection and see what it's given us. Great on the right hand side, but then look at the left hand side. What's happened is Photoshop has grabbed parts of Harry thinking it can use that to fill it in, and obviously that's not really what we want to happen. Now I think I've shown before on this channel a little trick that you've got when you can use layer masks to paint out an area before you use content aware, but thankfully with this new one you don't have to do that. Let's just go back a couple of steps to the point where we are, where we've got these active selections. What I'll now do is I will go to edit and choose content aware fill. And this brings up this new dialog box, and when it first comes up, Photoshop kind of uses its brain to say, well, all this area in green here is what I'm going to use to fill in these empty spaces. And you can see in this preview on the right hand side, it's pretty much giving us exactly the same results as what I just had in the old version of Content Aware. But what we can do here, when we've got this little tool over on the left hand side, this is called the sampling brush tool, and by default it's clicked onto like a minus. So whenever I use it, it's got the minus, it'll kind of like remove the green. So the green areas is what Photoshop is being told, use these bits to fill in the blank bits. Anywhere that's not got the green overlay on it, and you can change the colour of that overlay, anywhere that's not got that overlay on it, it won't use it. So now that I've removed that off Harry, keep an eye on that preview on the bottom right hand corner. Let's just release that. You'll see that it'll start to spin in the bottom right hand corner around here, the spinning wheel of death. And can you see now it's not used it at all? So it's done a fantastic job of filling in that area there, which is just an absolute lifesaver. Now you can see at the bottom here that's still processing. It's obviously done a very, very quick version here so that you can see a preview. You need to, I find that I kind of wait until that's finished spinning there, because sometimes I found that Photoshop was hanging a bit if I kind of clicked OK as soon as I saw the preview done. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click OK. Now that spinning wheel is gone, click OK, and we go back into Photoshop, and there we go. Get rid of the selections, active selections there, and it's job done. Done a fantastic job of filling that area just in there. Now you'll see that over in the layers panel you can have these new areas come up as a new layer above your original. I just can kind of flatten that down so it becomes one layer, and there are some parts you can see on the background just here where, and this is my fault entirely, the background wasn't as taut as it should have been. Now the reason for that is that the area that Danny and myself were working in was really challenging. In fact, I'd probably say it's the most challenging environment that I've photographed one of these portraits in at the minute, and I couldn't actually extend the background fully up, so it had to be slightly loose, which is why we've got these kind of areas here where it's kind of folding just a little bit. But easily fixed. Just go over to the toolbar, I'll get the patch tool, and then I will just very loosely and randomly just circle some of those areas, drag them across, and Photoshop will do a good job of just kind of blending them in so it looks kind of like it's part of the background. To be honest with you, quite good like that. Simply then just get the crop tool. If I do any cropping in Photoshop, In the options bar at the top of the screen here, you've got this delete cropped pixels checkbox. I don't tick that because I don't want to, although I'm going to do a square crop now, I don't want to be limited to a square crop, because some people, when they, I'm getting these pictures are being ordered and some people are buying them, they might want them as a 10:8 or a 12:10 or whatever. If I just leave it as a square crop, that's really going to limit what I can do with this. But let's just drag this down now, go somewhere like that, press enter, and job done. So that's kind of how I go about making a background bigger. I mean, the background that I use is incredibly portable. It's a 7 foot by 5 foot, but sometimes you do need more. And this is just one of those really simple ways that you can get more out of your backgrounds. We'll have a quick break for a quick advert. Then I want to show you something else where the background isn't tall enough and you're going to have to do some blending in. So let's take a quick break and we'll come straight back in with that. Alrighty, so now that we're back in, this is another picture that you can see in front of me here. Just incidentally as well, I can see there's loads of stuff going on in the chat room. I'm a man, I can't multitask. I will get back to you with any questions, but if you've got any kind of burning questions, I've got friends of mine in the room there. There's Anthony, Ian and Brian. They know the kind of stuff I do, so if you've got any really burning questions, I'm sure those guys can help you out. Hint, hint. We've got 162 people in the room. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. If you haven't already, share the fact that this is going on. The more the merrier. Come to the party. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you then is this picture here. This is the finished picture. It's of a friend of mine called Scott Kelly, who's what they call a yeoman warder, commonly known as a beefeater, who works at the Tower of London. And I was recently up there, invited up to photograph Scott and a guy called Jim Hooper, who's a World War II veteran that Scott was presenting some money to, which was going to the Blind Veterans Charity. So Scott asked me if we could take these pictures, which we did, but it wasn't as simple as first thought. So let me just show you a couple of the pictures that were needed to make this one up. I'm just going to click on these two here. I'll press C on the keyboard and it'll do like a compare mode. Press tab, get rid of those side bits. All right, so this is what we had to do. And this is one of the things I love about photography, if I'm honest. I love the problem solving. I mean, sure, it's great when everything just goes swimmingly, of course, but I love the problem solving. And this is a great thing about the retouching. Some of the things you just have to do in the computer afterwards, I didn't have a background that was about, crumbs, I don't know, 9.5 foot tall to get this ornate, I forgot the name of it now, but this ornate kind of spear thing that Scott's holding. Don't kill me, Scott, if you're listening and watching this and I didn't get the name right. So you kind of think, what can we do? So the workflow, just to give you an idea of how we actually went around doing this, and I have done a blog post on this as well, but to give you an idea of what we had to do, the first picture I did is the one that you can see on the left hand side, where my same 7 by 5 foot Westcott background is on the floor. Okay, my camera is on a tripod, fixed down, locked in place, and I took a picture of Scott standing perfectly still. Then what I did was, behind the background, because it is so light, a friend of mine called Jane Barkway-Harney, she's actually hiding behind that, holding the X-Drop frame. And once we've done the first picture of Scott, he then keeps standing perfectly still and Jane just lifts the background vertically. and that's where we get the picture on the right hand side. And then knowing what Photoshop can do, which is what I'll show you now, we can then blend those images together really, really easily. So let's just kind of go back into this kind of area just here. Let's get the tab, get the two images back, and we'll go to the grid. So what we're going to do is this. Let's just make sure that these images, I've got the same settings on them, same editing sessions, so I'll synchronize those. Right. What I'm going to do then, we're going to take these two images, the ones that we took where the background was on the floor and then one above. I'm going to click on one, hold the shift key down and click on the other. So they're now both highlighted in Lightroom. Then I'll go to the photo menu, go edit in and open as layers in Photoshop. So that's now processing. You can see the little spinning wheel of death doing its big thing there because there's two rather large images coming through. We'll just let it spin and whatever. You can see there's activity going on in the layers panel, while it puts both of these into the same working document as opposed to two completely separate tabs. Let's just clear that crop tool down just there. So here we go. Let's just double click on the hand tool. So now we've got these two images open in Photoshop in the same document, one on top of the other. In fact, no, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Let's just rewind. You have to do this rewind when we're doing it live in Photoshop. Let's go back to the images first of all, and I'll open up both of these two images here, and I will just use the crop tool to get out bits that I don't want. I'll crop out from the left and I'll crop in on the right like that. Don't need these bits either side. That's that one. Let's go to the other image. We'll get the crop tool, drag that in just there, and drag that in just there. Now you might be thinking, if we don't need this top area, why not just kind of crop that down to maybe around about there? The reason we don't do that is because obviously now Lightroom brings everything closer, so Scott on that picture is going to be way bigger than Scott on that picture, even if I crop out the bottom bit, because it would have to be exactly the same crop top and bottom for Scott to be the same size in both pictures. Does that make sense? All right, so what I'll do is I will leave those top bits in like that. Then we'll go to the grid view, hold down my shift key, click on the other one there, and we'll go photo, edit in, and open as layers in Photoshop. And again, we'll go back. I could have obviously cropped it in Photoshop, but if I can do it in Lightroom, I might as well do it in Lightroom just quickly there. So we'll just let that bring its bits back in, like so. And there we go. Right, okay, so now both of them are open in Photoshop. So let's just now, one thing we're going to do is we need to line these two up, because when I turn that top layer on and off, you can see that although Scott was perfectly still, because of the way that things have had to be cropped, they're not perfectly lined up. So the first thing I'll do, top layer is highlighted, hold down the shift key, click on the bottom layer. They're now both active layers. Then go to the edit menu and choose auto align layers. And when we do that, we get this little property box comes up, and pretty much you're going to leave this in the default settings. So just leave it on auto. Don't worry about this lens correction where it says vignette removal and geometric distortion. Just leave that well alone and just click OK. Photoshop will do its thing, and it'll then line them up as good as it possibly can. There's always going to be some movement, but it does a damn good job. So now you look, if I turn that top layer on and off, we're really getting there now. We're starting to cook on gas there. All right, so that's that one. All right, so now they're lined up, we can actually get rid of areas that we don't want. All right, we can start to get rid of some areas that we don't want. Let's have a look at that there. That's lined up. All right, so what I'm going to do now then, I'll turn off the top layer. We'll just look at this bottom layer first of all. I'm going to get my marquee tool and draw out a selection on that top part, because obviously we don't want this area here, which was the wall behind the background. So we'll crop that down to about there and press delete. We don't need that. Now let's turn on the top layer. I'll turn off the bottom one so we can see what's happening. Get my marquee tool, and now we'll cut out the bit off the bottom that we don't need as well. So all the way down, that's all height. You can see the selection's gone all the way around it. We'll press delete, and now that's gone. And let's turn them back on. So you can see, even before we've done anything, you can see what we're wanting to do. We've got Scott lined up perfectly. We've got these bottom area here. It's all looking great, but clearly it's not blending in that well. Certainly the background isn't blending in. Even the color here of his clothing isn't blending in. And we've also got these transparent areas as well. And this is what is an incredible lifesaver. Top layer, as you can see over in the layers panel, is active. I'm going to hold down my shift key and click on the bottom layer. So now they're both active layers. Then I'm going to go back to that edit menu. And here we've got auto blend layers. This is amazing. Auto blend layers. It's only a small dialog box, but don't be deceived. It is incredibly powerful. Again, pretty much leaving the old default settings in there. I'm going to leave this set to panorama. But the most important thing is at the bottom here. There's two checkboxes. One says seamless tones and colors, and one says content aware fill transparent areas. I'm going to put the ticks, or leave them in rather, in both of those checkboxes, and then click OK. Now watch what happens. And then for those of you who do use Photoshop quite regular, imagine having to do this manually and how long this would take you. But I'm going to click OK. Bearing in mind, we've got two images here, really, two 16-bit images. Let's click OK and see what Photoshop can do for us. So here we go. There's OK. Bit of whirring going on, the old green lights. You can hear the fan in the background probably. Spinning wheel of death. And then all of a sudden, the magic should happen. There we go. Look at that. How cool is that? Yes, there are some areas that I've got to work on, but now look, that background is looking pretty seamless. I can use the patch tool to sort this out, but look at this now, how that's all blended in just there. The clothing is now blended in as well. Can you imagine having to do that manually? That would take you forever. Now at this particular point here, there were things that I tidied up, like in this top right hand corner. I'd probably, I don't know, maybe just get a brush or a clone stamp tool we could go for. Let's just very quickly just do this. Let's just clone that out just there, something very rough and loose. And we'll get the patch tool on this little bit down here and drag that there like so. And I suppose now what we could do is just then come in and do the thing like we did with the picture of Harry Billings. We could get the crop tool. We can kind of, we can come outwards like so. Let's make it a bit bigger like that. We've got the transparent areas either side now. We get the marquee tool, drag it down. Let's just make sure it does include all of that. Hold the shift key to add to the selection just like so. Go up to the edit menu, choose the new content aware fill, which is just outstanding. Paint off the area that we don't want it to include. Obviously we don't want any red areas included in that. We can use the left and right bracket keys to make that area bigger or smaller, but let's just paint that off. Paint it off Scott's face, paint off his shoes like so. We can see the spinning wheel thing down the bottom here, giving it large. And it doesn't take that long until we can start to see a preview, he says. Fingers crossed. Now this is actually quite a challenging one for Photoshop when you think, there you go, look at that. How good is that? Now what I'll do is once this has finished spinning in the right bottom right hand corner here, I'll click OK to send this over into Photoshop. And then kind of show you the things that you would manually need to do, right? So that's looking fantastic. We'll click OK, come back into Photoshop, get rid of the selection there, and then zoom in. Now, obviously, we need to fix this area here where the floor and the background aren't touching. And what you'll also notice is because this kind of herringbone patterned flooring, I think that's what you call it, you can see how it's kind of struggled to do that there. So all you would have to do with that is just get a blank layer, get your clone stamp tool and start to kind of paint in those areas to try and make some new lines over there. That's a little bit of manual work, but if you think how long it would have taken you to blend it all in, I think you'll agree that's pretty much one hell of a time saver. All right, let's have another quick ad, and then I'm going to show you something to do with some skin work. So quick advert from BenQ. All right, so we're getting there. We're getting there. All seems well so far. There's Anthony Crothers. Yes, herringbone floor. Hey, that was not a bad guess, was it? Not a bad guess. Right, last thing I want to show you, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a disclaimer here, because bear in mind, I would not be doing editing necessarily quite as quick as this. I would be taking my time to do it, but I want to kind of give you an overview of the process I would be going through to fix something here. Because if I show you the before picture of this wonderful gentleman here called Danny McCrudden, himself a World War II veteran from the Royal Navy, such a lovely, lovely man. And this is the picture before. Now what you're going to notice if I go before and after, look at his hands, in particular this wrist. So there's before, there's after. Before, after. All right, so clearly he's got this bandaging on here from kind of like treatment that he's been getting him over at the hospital or whatever. I didn't want to ask him. Now, when it comes to these particular portraits, it is incredibly important to me that, you know, obviously these pictures, they're going to be around for a long time. They're going to be passed on to the family members who are going to look at these in 10, 20, 30, 40 years and beyond. What I don't want to happen is for people in the future to look at these images, especially his children, let's say, looking back and going, seeing that bandaging and going, oh yeah, that, you know, that was when dad wasn't well. That you don't want to be reminded of that. All you want to see when you're looking at this picture is that. It reminds you of just a lovely, lovely man. I don't want to have to think about when he was ill, maybe he was going through treatment and all this kind of stuff. So I want to give you an idea of how I got rid of that bandage. So as before, let's get this into Photoshop. Hold down the Command or Control key, depending on whether you're working in Apple or on a Windows machine, or press E to get that over into Photoshop. And let's just go to Photoshop just here. It'll open it up just there. All right. Now, like I said, okay, not forgetting, disclaimer. I wouldn't ordinarily do this as quick as this. Just want to give you an idea. But this is what I did. And again, I love the problem solving with all of this. All right. So first things first, we've got a clean area over here, which we possibly could use there. So what I did when I worked on this picture was I got my lasso tool and I made a very loose selection around the wrist. Not to have to include any areas kind of outside of it too much, but we'll try and get in as much as we can of it, like there, something like that. I don't want to include that bit of the shirt, so I press the Alt key to get rid of it just like that. Now that we've done that, I'm going to copy that selected area onto its own layer so that I can then move it around and manipulate it so that I can cover over that bandage there. So Command or Control key, press J to jump it up onto its own layer. You can see there it is now. And then what we'll do is we'll go to the Edit menu and we'll go Transform and we'll go Flip Horizontal. I can get my move tool and I can now move it along. So I've obviously flipped it horizontal, so it kind of follows the same angle now as this wrist over here. Now let me just zoom in just a touch. Now when I'm kind of lining these up here, what I will do is lower the opacity just a little bit so I can kind of see through it to see where we're going to line it up. And I'm going to concentrate mainly on the top area, this part of the wrist just here. So we'll kind of line it up to around about there. Now, when I do that, don't worry too much about the bottom area. We can sort that out. But you can see how the thumb is going to be naturally resting on a piece of skin just there. If I just turn that off, it's going to kind of be, we can mask it out now so the thumb looks like it's resting on it. So now that I'm at that point, I'm actually going to go, let's just bring up the opacity 100%. I'm going to add a layer mask. Now a layer mask is just incredibly powerful. What it allows us to do is hide and reveal certain parts of a picture. Now I'm going to first of all hide this wrist, this new wrist completely. So go to the bottom of the layers panel. We've got the third icon from the left hand side. There's the layer mask. I'm going to hold down my Alt key or Option key, depending on what I'm working on, and click on the layer mask icon. And that gives me a black layer mask. So that piece of the wrist is hidden behind this black mask. And I can reveal parts of it now with a brush, a white brush. So I'm going to get my brush. My foreground color is white. Let's just make sure that it's not completely soft. So we'll kind of harden it up just a little bit, somewhere around about there. And then now increase the size of it. And I'm going to start to paint it in just to reveal it over the areas that I want. So I might just lower the opacity just a little bit of the layer. Let's just lower the opacity just there. In fact, no, tell you what, let's just keep that up and I'll bring that. I'm going to paint that really quickly. We don't have to be accurate because I have done a disclaimer. It's not going to be perfect, but it just gives you an overview as to how I would tackle this. So you'll see I've got not a perfectly soft brush, but it has got an element of softness to it. So I'm not going to get too close to the rest of the skin that's there at the minute, because it'll give it a really soft edge to it and we don't really want that. So now that I've kind of very quickly done that bit, I will then harden the brush up even more and then come in to the areas that are lining up next to these fingers here. So let's just now do this. So otherwise it just wouldn't look right. If it was too soft next to the fingers, the edges or the sides of the fingers would become really fuzzy. So we need to harden that brush down just a touch. All right, so we'll come into here, like so, something like that. Very quickly like that. That's looking good. Now we need to get rid of this area here. That's obviously original piece, and it's below, the original picture is below this new wrist. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the original picture and just add a new blank layer in between the two. And then I'm going to get the clone stamp tool. I'm going to get my rotate brush, my rotate tool rather, and go that way, because I find it easier to clone from left to right as opposed to up and down. So we'll go for that. Get my clone stamp tool, make sure in the options bar that it says current and below. Otherwise I'm asking it to clone something that's in an invisible layer. And obviously it needs to tell, I need to tell this layer that there's stuff beneath it. So clone from the stuff beneath it. So with my clone stamp tool, I will then, let's just bring down the size of it. I'll very quickly come in and just get rid of this area here. I'll follow the line of that little seam there actually, that'll help. Okay, something like that. Like so. Again, working really quickly just to give you an overview of what we need to do to get rid of it. So let's just come in really quick here. Like so. All right. I should have some music in the background here, shouldn't I, playing while I'm doing this? But this will give you an idea of how I approached it. But again, bearing in mind, in fact, we've got some skin there, so let's harden that clone stamp tool down a bit, just so that edge is a bit harder. That'll work better. And we'll just get rid of that. All right, okay, let's just double click on the rotate tool, brings it around the right way, just like so. All right, now, next thing we're going to do is we just need to sort this bottom bit down here. So I'm going to click back on the layer that contains the wrist. In fact, let's just be a good boy and let's write in wrist so we can see it just there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to manipulate this to kind of cover this bottom area. So we're going to go to Edit, Transform, and we'll go to Warp. Now ordinarily, again, this isn't a sales pitch for Photoshop by any means, but obviously it kind of gives an idea of the new stuff that's been brought in, because we've had Warp in Photoshop for quite some time, and this is generally how it would be. So it kind of covers the whole area that we're going to be warping, and we'd kind of click inside it and move it around like this. But you can see that it is quite limiting in that no matter where I click and manipulate, it's going to move every single part of the area of that wrist. So let's just bring it back to the starting point. Let's just bring it back to there, because now with this new version, in the options bar at the top of the screen here, we can actually have more control over our warp tool. And there's an option at the top here called grid, and we can split this whole area here into segments: 3x3, 4x4, 5x5. So now what happens is, let's just zoom in just a touch. If I wanted to manipulate this area here, I could just do this. I could kind of drag it down without it really affecting or impacting too much on other areas. Okay, so we can do this, twist it around like that. I'll just drag it down, literally just drag it down to cover those areas there. But it doesn't stop there. It really doesn't stop there. We can also come in and split these as well. So I might want to have even more control by adding even more control points in. So let's go into there, add another one. So now I can just control that and start to manipulate it. Can you see how so much more control it's going to give us just there? Absolutely brilliant. I love it. I really love it. We can even do our own. If you hold down the Alt key or the Option key, you can actually automatically add them and put them where you want as well. So there's so much control now that we have when we're using the Warp tool. Now I'm going to leave that little bit there just to give you an idea of what I did, but I don't want to keep you waiting too long. Let's just click OK on that. All right, so imagine now I've blended that in just by dragging it all down. Again, it's just a disclaimer. I'm not going to rush this just so I can get it done and have you just kind of sitting there looking at something rubbish. But how now, the next thing I want to do is blend the colour and get it all to match in. Lots of ways you could do this, but a real simple way is maybe go to the levels adjustment, where we've got the histogram here with the shadow area, midtones and highlights. And we can start to manipulate these. But you'll see as I do that, the whole of the picture is being affected. We only want it to affect the wrist area. Now, if we look in the layers panel, that new wrist area is directly below this levels adjustment. So I can tell the levels adjustment by clicking this little icon here called a clipping mask. If I click on that, you'll see the adjustment moves across, got an arrow coming down now. So now what this means is that this adjustment layer here is only going to affect the one that is directly beneath it, which is the wrist. So now look, when I start to manipulate the sliders, can you see how it's only affecting that one there? Let's just go back just a touch. I find it easier to kind of blend it in when it's not quite so close. So let's just go to around about there. Let's bring that up just a touch to around about there. That's looking better already. And change the colour a little bit. You could do it by going into all the different channels in here, but you know, let's keep it nice and simple. I'm going to come up to another adjustment layer now, a colour balance adjustment layer, which I also need to tell to only affect the layers directly below it, which is this wrist one. So we click on that clipping mask. Looks a bit yellow on the skin here, so let's go to the yellows and remove some of that, like so. Maybe add just a little bit more red into it, or take somewhere like that just there. That's pretty good. Let's put all these layers here into a group so we can see the be. In fact, let's put both of these. No, I tell you what. Let's just go. There's before, there's after. It's looking better already, right? That's looking better already. Now, what else could you do? Because obviously we've got some kind of line here that isn't joining up very well. We need to blend the colour in just a little bit where that matches. This is where I would do maybe, I don't know, frequency separation as an example. Let's just create another copy of this. We'll go image and duplicate. And we'll just bring this up. And let's just flatten the layers just for a second, just for speed to show you. Now, I am going to do a new video soon on frequency separation. I am doing that a little bit differently these days as well. But let's just click on it. If you don't know how to use frequency separation, have a look on the video channel, my YouTube channel. There's a video in there. There's also a download you can get to use this action for using the frequency separation. But we can get rid of the line here by going to the detail. You've got the detail at the top. You've got the color at the bottom. So if I just show only this layer, can you see how now it's all these areas here? There's no color as such, but lots of detail. And that line there is very prominent. So it's the detail layer that I will use to remove it. Click on it, get my clone stamp tool, make sure it's nice and soft. And then we'll just come in, sample some of this skin here. Whoops, we don't, oh, good. That was on purpose. When you're using the clone stamp tool with frequency separation, up in the options bar at the top there, only set it to current layer. Otherwise you get that weird funky color appearing. But now we'll just come in and start to cover up that line just there, just blending it all in so it's not so prominent and so obvious. All right, something like that. And then you could then come down to the color layer, add a blank layer, get the gradient tool, and then start to kind of just blend it in by adding in some color just like this to cover over those areas there. So that kind of gives you a rough idea as to how I went about fixing that. Yeah, we don't want to go too long because it took me about half an hour. You really don't want to be sitting there for that long. So let's now just dive out. I'm going to give you a quick, in fact, let's just come back to the screen just there, because now I'm going to give my voice a break and I want to kind of show you, in fact, let's just come back over to here. Let's just go back over to there and I want to show you Lightroom, because one thing I want to show you is, I've told you at the start, we've been working on, done some filming recently for the new tutorial. Those of you who responded to my email that I sent out about the name it should be given, whether it should be called Small Flash or Speedlights, thank you so much. Those really helped, but it was kind of like 50-50 what people wanted. So I've ended up calling it Classic Portraits with one flash. All right, and then the subtitle will be using Speedlights, blah 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 blah. But these pictures here, as well as the pictures like you've just seen of Harry Billinge, and all the other people there sitting down at the chairs, real classic timeless portraits. I've also done a recording to show how we do these really close-in portraits. There's Anthony. And one thing I really love about these pictures here is, and this is what things that gets real comments, is the shallow depth of field about them. You can see how his eyes are really sharp, and then everything else is starting to fade out and blur out beyond his eyes. So you're really drawn into it. So when you look at the face, you wonder, what on earth have they been thinking about, or what have they experienced? Now, another thing about them, not only are they shallow depth of field, I always do those portraits after I've done the seated one, because by that time the relationship has developed and it's much more comfortable for them when I get closer in with the lens. So if you look at this picture here of Harry, look at the exposure that's on that picture of Harry there, and then you've got this one. So it's taken afterwards. Excuse me. The exposure on the face is pretty much the same. And that's part of the video we recorded, is to show how that's done. So this is about 3 minutes long. I want to show you now a little video, which is a segment from the tutorial to show how we go about mimicking the settings, because to get this picture here, we've got a certain set of settings because I want all of Harry to be in focus. So f8 was roughly used at 125th of a second. This one here was roughly, I think it was f2, but at 2000th of a second. And I want to show you how easy it is to work out how to do it. So we do need to make a few changes, certainly not to the setup, because I want the actual exposure to remain constant from the first pictures we've done to this one. But because I'm going to use a shallow depth of field, there are a few changes to make. So if we take what we've done so far, we were shooting at 125th of a second and with an aperture of f8 on these particular ones of Anthony. Obviously we just did the ISO there to bring in the ambient light, but let's just concentrate on the aperture and the shutter speed. Now what I want to do is have that shallow depth of field. So I'm going to open up the eye of the camera and I'm probably going to go to something like, let's just take this really wide open now on this particular lens here, this 85mm lens. I'm going to take this to f2. So I've gone from f8 to f2. Now because I've adjusted the aperture, I'm also now going to have to alter the shutter speed because I want the actual exposure to remain constant. And I kind of think of this like a seesaw. If we have like a seesaw, on one side we have f8 and on the other side we have 125th. If I change f8 to f2, that's going to affect the seesaw and it's not going to be nice and horizontal now. So let's just say it kind of goes f2, kind of drops it down, shutter speed's way up. I now need to kind of alter the shutter speed, the corresponding amount of change as I've done with the aperture. And that sounds a bit weird, but let's just break it down. f8 to f2. We've gone f8 to 5.6, that's one stop. 5.6 to 4, 2 stops. 4 to 2.8, 3 stops. 2.8 to f2, 4 stops. So I've altered the aperture by 4 stops. I've opened it up. For me to make the corresponding change to the shutter speed so that we have a consistent exposure with this shot and the previous ones, I need to change the shutter speed by 4 equivalent stops. So what's that going to be? We're going to go from 125th to 250. That's 1 stop. 250 to 500, 2 stops. 500 to 1,000, 3 stops. 1,000 to 2,000, 4 stops. So now my camera settings are f2 and we're going to go to 2,000th of a second. Now this is where we really do need the technology because now ordinarily most flashes and cameras can only speak to each other at a certain speed. And what I mean by that is when that shutter opens on the camera and the flash goes off, the speed that that shutter opens and closes is only a limit to how fast it can go before all the light hits that sensor and closes. If it goes too quickly, not all the light's going to hit that sensor and you're going to get that black banding start to appear on your picture. Now I'm shooting at 2,000th of a second. So now I need to use something called high speed sync. Other brands may be calling it something different like high sync or what have you, but I think pretty much across the board on most brands, we know it as high speed sync. All right, so just on the chat room then, just watching while a few people were commenting as that was playing. Hopefully that all makes sense. Massive thanks to my friends Ian, Anthony, Steve, Gez, Brian for all helping me out doing the filming on that, but really pleased with it. Just the editing side of it to finish off now, but hopefully that kind of makes sense for those shallow depth of field portraits, having that kind of seesaw motion. Now, one of the things that some people have said afterwards when I've shown or talked about these portraits, these close-in shallow depth of field portraits, is, well, if you use high-speed sync, then why do you even bother turning it off? Why not just leave it on all the time? So I hope I'm not being presumptuous here, but I'm going to play you another short video now, which kind of explains why. It's only short, but it explains why you don't use high-speed sync all the time. Why don't you leave it on? And just give us some feedback maybe in the chat room, whatever. Just so, you know, is this coming across clear in the explanations? Because I want this tutorial to really go down well. Obviously, you know, it's for me, I haven't released one for a long time, so I want to make sure that it comes out really well. So I'll play this for you and then we're going to be pretty much done. All right, so play this for you now. Now, before we move on, there is one thing that I want to clear up about high-speed sync, because if you are new to it, having just seen the tutorial, you may well be thinking, well,
if it's that good, why don't I just leave it turned on all the time? And you wouldn't be wrong to think that. However, you do not want to do that. You only want to use it when you go above the native sync speed that your camera and your flash talk together. Now that can vary depending on what brand of camera you're using. I've used Nikon before and that was 250th of a second where the flash and the camera would talk perfectly together. I've used Canon before when it was 160th of a second. So it kind of varies whatever camera brand you're using. However, there is an optimum speed, an optimum sync speed that your camera and your flash will work together. And what I mean by that is that when the sensor starts to become revealed, once it's fully revealed, the flash will go off, it'll fill that sensor with light, and then the sensor will be covered. That's what normal sync speeds, native sync speeds will do. However, when we use high speed sync, we're not actually getting one single burst of light from the flash. It might look like it to us, but what's actually happening behind the scenes is the flash is pulsing really, really quickly. So as that sensor starts to be revealed, the flash is now pulsing at an incredible rate of knots, so that by the time the sensor is then covered up, it actually has covered the sensor with light. Now that sounds great, however there is a trade-off, because unlike when we normally use the flash, we just get one burst of light, a load of power coming out of it. Because we're now using high-speed sync and it's creating these pulses of light, it means that the flash isn't able to recycle to its full power each and every time. So there's a reduced power output. So you'll find that when you're using high-speed sync, if you're using it for close-up portraits, it'll work perfectly. But the minute you start to bring it further away from your subject to maybe get a full-length shot, that's when you'll start to find it'll struggle because it hasn't got that power to push the light the distance to cover that kind of working area. So hopefully that's cleared up, that you would only really want to use high-speed sync when you need to. So just get to know what the native sync speed of your camera is, that it'll work with your flash. Once you go beyond that, turn on high-speed sync and you'll have a blast. You'll have a great time. You actually are able to shoot up to something like 8,000th of a second. So it's great fun, extremely useful, but only when you need to use it.
All right, so hopefully that came through really clear. Listen, folks, I've had a blast tonight. Once I'd got over that testing period before we went live, but again, massive thanks you to Anthony. But I've really enjoyed it. Hope this has been useful. I want to just kind of give you the heads up. If you don't know about it already, check out the podcast that Dave Clayton and myself do. My best mate, he shoots, he draws. We do all sorts. We've literally got over 100 episodes now. We've just recorded episode 101, which is hard to believe we've gone through that many, but you'll find it on iTunes, on every great place that you can find podcasts. The web address you can see in the bottom left hand corner, heshootshedraws.com. So there's that. I also want to let you know about Dave's new book, because he's finally done it. He has now released his own book on InDesign, and I am over the moon for him. I really am. It's a cracking book, as you can see here. I have got my copy just here. It is packed, because what I'm going to be also doing with this tutorial is having not just everything transcribed like I have with the other tutorials, is there's going to be a book produced as well, an ebook, PDF that you can download, and it's all going to be in there as well, because I know some people prefer to watch videos, some people like to read, so I want to try and cater for everybody with that. But folks, thank you so much for sticking around. We've got a busy week coming on. There's a lot going on here at the minute. We've sold our house, we're moving and all that kind of stuff. So I will let you know. I'll post up very, very soon, maybe tomorrow, when the next one of these will be. But thanks for sticking around, because we've been going 53 minutes now. So you're a star. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. I'll be in the chat room for a little while if anybody's going to be sticking around. But for now, see you next time.
Hi, I'm Glyn Dewis, and I want to let you know about my brand new book, The Photoshop Toolbox. Now, Photoshop is a huge piece of software that is constantly being updated, giving the user seemingly endless creative possibilities. But being such an incredible piece of software can also make it seem confusing and difficult to master. Now, the book is made up of 6 chapters, where we start off going through the basics to fully understand layers, and then we move on to layer masks, brushes, blend modes. There's some bonus content, and then a full tutorial bringing everything together in a complete retouch of an image from start to finish. You see, I believe that no matter how much bigger Photoshop becomes, at the heart of Photoshop are three things: layer masks, brushes and blend modes. If we can learn to understand these three areas of Photoshop, the sky really is the limit. So that's the Photoshop Toolbox, available now.